Hello, everyone. This is Dave Burda, news editor at Foresight Health. Welcome to our How Healthcare Revolutionaries Think podcast, where we get inside the heads of people trying to change the current healthcare system. Our guest on today's show is Demi Radeva. Radeva is the Chief Strategy and Operations Officer at Xanthos Health and the Chief Strategist for Acros Advisory Services. Xanthos Health connects cancer patients with the community support groups and the social services that they might need. And Acros helps healthcare startups get off the ground. I interviewed Radeva as part of our How Healthcare Revolutionaries Think series, and I asked her how old she was when her and her family emigrated to the United States. They say a lady never discloses her age. Well, at least that's what they say in the movies. Radeva had a different reason for not talking about her age, and how her experiences with age discrimination are an important lesson for up-and-coming healthcare entrepreneurs. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Let's talk about why you don't want to talk about your age. Why is that an issue?
Sure.
I'm just curious about that. So what's the story behind that?
This is back from my consulting days, right? When I was a young consultant and I was working on projects. And I remember traveling to client sites, and let's say we've worked virtually for a few months, and then I get to meet them in person and they're like, oh my God, I've been listening to this skit. Tell me how to run this business. And so
okay.
It was often shocking that, someone of my age would have any sort of insight or advice or, something to offer to a business leader who's seasoned so that they can run their business better. Yeah.
So do you think that way because of an incident, or do you think that way because that's just how you think? You know what I mean? Like, did something happen to say, oh boy, I better not tell my age in the future because of this reaction I got?
That's a great question. I think from my experience, unfortunately, it has happened and continues to happen over and over and over again. And so I've had to the point where former leaders of mine have sort of tried to pry it out of me. Well, how old are you?
Right.
And in a way question, credibility or experience or whatever it may be, instead of just really kind of be and experience and sort of trust the advice that you're providing as the professional. So yeah, and a lot of people are like, wait, you teach at the University of Minnesota and you've done executive education at Stanford already, and you've done all these things. And how is that even possible to do all of that? I even had a situation internationally when I was in London interviewing for a job, and I presented my resume and we're having a great conversation. I passed the case interview with flying colors. And so it kind of came to the final interview, and the interviewer just had no concept of, wait, so you worked while you're in college? Which I had to work so I can pay my tuition.
Right.
But he just couldn't understand, how could I have this much work experience at the age that I was at and with the level of knowledge and experience that I was coming through. So, because that's just not something that's very usual for folks to do in Europe anyways.
Right.
A lot of education is it's different. It's paid for. You don't have to work when you're studying in a lot of the instances. So it's highly unusual. But yeah, that's just something that I try to stay away from. And I think it's great advice. Strip the dates from your resume as much as you can.
Right. I was just going to, I guess two things. Did you get the job in London, or did you not get the job in London?
No, he thought that I was lying.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it definitely has taken opportunities away from me.
Wow. So you don't put your age on your resume or your bio. So if somebody goes to your LinkedIn profile, they won't find that information. And that's all deliberate based on your experience, that people may not take you as seriously.
Correct.
Wow.
Or that they would take away opportunities from me because they don't think, well, she doesn't have the experience, or, she's just not seasoned for whatever reason, instead of really looking at the experience. And so when you strip away, that's an advice I have for young people. at a certain point in time, right? Not right out of college, but after you've had some solid experience, you can start taking away those timelines that could really help you get better opportunities.
Interesting. Now, do you think any of that has to do with the fact that you're a woman? In other words, would somebody with your exact same resume, everything exactly the same, and it was John Smith, do you think John Smith would get that kind of reaction?
Oh, David.
Well, I'm a reporter.
Yes, you are. And so at the University of Minnesota, when I was still getting my undergraduate degree, one of the jobs that I had was supporting one of the professors within the human resources department at the university to write and publish a research study regarding resumes and bias. And so what my task was to get in there and work with a computer scientist so we can computer generate resumes. So we had a variety of roles, variety of resumes that everything was the same. The only thing that changed on those resumes was the names. And unfortunately, the results of the study showed that there was significant bias when a candidate's name on their resume was foreign or sounded different, or you could sort of imply what their race or ethnicity or, other kind of demographic details are. The rates for callbacks, the rates for interview invitations diminished. And so that was my first, big sort of validation of what I was experiencing already as someone who is an first generation immigrant who at the time didn't speak as great of English as maybe I do now either. So
got it. Well, let me ask you this. You also put on your bio that you were Miss Minnesota International for 2021. Now, in the same vein, you did include that, on your bio. How does that fit into this conversation we're having? Like, if you don't want to put your age, why would you put that?
Miss Minnesota International was an incredible experience for me. It was an experience that helped me or taught me how to run a business before I actually had to run one, which I do now, in the sense that when going through that experience, I got weekly coaching on how to story tell. How do I tell my story? And so now a lot of the founders that I work with, we go through, weekly pitches and practice pitch, etc. So there was so many things that were a part of that experience that really laid the foundation. It made me feel secure that I can make the jump out, from corporate into the startup world and be successful. Like I mentioned, the storytelling, but also the networking and the connections and being able to connect with policymakers and help influence, that space, as well as meet with businesses and find sponsors and then fundraise for the various nonprofit organizations that I was representing, as well as just formulate a platform that is clear and succinct and that has the potential to affect millions of people's lives. So my platform was called Food for Thought, and it was focused on empowering the future generation through better nutrition and eradicating chronic diet-related disease. So at that point in time, I had spent, for a variety of reasons that I'm sure we'll talk about, I had been a beneficiary of food shelters. And so I had been working with food shelters for a long time, and they had made a huge impact on my life and my family's life and sustenance. And I was just hoping to pull all of that work that I had done and all the knowledge that I had from the nonprofit world, from my lived experience, and also from the corporate world, because at that point in time, I had been leading United Healthcare's nutrition strategy for a few years. And so really combining all of that knowledge and expertise into one platform to help impact my community positively. I grew up in Minnesota in many ways. It is my home now and has been for many, many years. And the community has given so much to me and my family. This was my way of kind of giving back, but in a very powerful way. This was a boot camp for me on how do you run a business in many ways.
Got it. So putting that on your CV and your resume is a positive versus maybe putting your birthday or other clues to your age as a negative.
Correct. Well, in my experience so far, that's proven to be the evidence that I'm getting, the type of recognition that I'm getting from people. It's a very different response having a title versus, listing or saying what my age is.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And let me do one more question on that topic. How do you think age and gender factor into, you talked about how people respond to resumes. Well, how do people respond to startups and disruptors and, great ideas in the same way? Is that a factor? In other words, if some really young person came up with the best idea ever, somebody's going to say, hey, you're 19, get out of here. Or you're a woman or a guy, a man, or you're older. Where does that fit into that part of what you do? What have you seen anecdotally?
Yeah. Well, I actually have an 18-year-old brother, and he is full of amazing ideas, and he is all about wanting to, start businesses, run businesses, work with businesses. And so I'm really excited to see where that takes him. And from my personal perspective, I love when I see a young person come up with an idea and just go for it and do it and learn from it. And so I do everything in my power that I can to encourage it. If he came to me with an idea, I would be like, let's go for it. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago, we were having a conversation about he loves cooking and I'm all about healthy and nutritious food. And so I was like, how can we combine both of our passions, his for cooking and mine for healthy food, and create something that folks can eat that would be healthy, that would add benefits to their diet, and see what happens. So we're just in ideation stage right now and just chatting about it. But I think there's something there. And I won't hesitate to be in business with a young person. I feel like they have so much energy. They haven't been sort of beat up by the system or the existing ways of doing things or thinking. And so when we get to the conversation around revolutionaries, I think that there's plenty of potential for young folks to really revolutionize. And oftentimes they are on the forefront of revolutionizing what does exist today. So I'm very excited about what's to come. I should have probably said a lady never tells her age.
No. Yeah, that's a cop-out answer, right? Well, it happens the other side of things, too. I'm older and people assume I don't know anything about digital publishing, but we've been doing it for years. But it's all those preconceived notions. So kudos to you for breaking through that. So that's excellent. So have a great rest of your day.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, David.
All right, nice meeting you.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
If you'd like to learn more about how Radeva thinks, please read our Q&A with her on ForesightHealth.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Dave Burda for Foresight Health.